So, fellow Star Wars fans, Ahsoka has finally landed on our screens with the first 2 episodes, so here is my rambly review, my recap, my breakdown of what we've seen so far. I would love to know your thoughts of these first 2 episodes down in the comments below, any theories that you have going into the next episode. So, immediately at the beginning of episode 1, we're introduced to the red opening crawl, which gives us that nice introduction into what's going on, as teased to us with Ahsoka's appearance way back in The Mandalorian Season 2, with her besting Morgan Elsbeth in that duel. A plot is underway to find the lost Imperial Grand Admiral Thrawn. Plus, of course, if the good guys can get to him first, there's a chance that they could also save Ezra Bridger too, so there is that, although there is a theory going around about that certain character that we get to see during these first couple of episodes that I want to talk about a little bit later, because I don't know about that one. So we more or less, right at the beginning of episode 1 here, pick up with the new mysterious characters known as Baylan Skoll and his apprentice Shin Hati. I hope I pronounced that correctly. We didn't really hear her name be said. I don't think we did. They identify themselves with an old Jedi clearance code to the New Republic ship that is transporting Morgan Elsbeth for trial, of which, I'm sorry to get nitpicky here, but of which I have no idea why it took so long for this to happen, since her capture happened back in Mandalorian Season 2, and you could come back to me and say, but Boba, it wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. But then we had Ahsoka go from that moment to besting her in Season 2 to hanging out with Luke in the Book of Boba Fett. So, what have they been doing? Why is it taking so long? I guess there was a trial date and they couldn't do it right away. I don't know, but kind of convenient. But what I liked about this scene immediately, and I think this is what a lot of people are digging, especially with the tense music at the beginning, is that this shows you the mood we're already entering the story with. After a brief exchange with the captain, we get some fun dialogue with Baylan saying, "Allow me to show you our identification. You're right about one thing, Captain. We are no Jedi." And then, boom. So I think most of us can agree that introducing any Force users in this fashion feels like the kind of Star Wars that a lot of fans have been wanting to see for quite a while. So as for some general thoughts with regards to Baylan and Shin here, from what we see of these 2 characters in the first 2 episodes, I'm really digging them. And I've loved the idea so much of Ray Stevenson playing a character like this in the Star Wars universe, and how he was so pumped about it at Star Wars Celebration. And that's just what makes it, obviously, rest in peace to Ray Stevenson, so tragic, because he'll never get to see the reception to what I assume, like myself, many fans love with regards to his performance. And it was really touching at the very end of the episode and how it said, "For our friend Ray." Instantly after this, we get some fun action with Baylan and his apprentice taking out the New Republic troops, one scene somewhat mirroring the Rogue One Darth Vader scene. And then they free Morgan Elsbeth, who seems to be familiar with Baylan here, saying, "You're true to your word." Now, I would like to think that maybe we're going to get a bit more explanation into this, but if not, I guess she just hired him previously, and where if in the event she gets captured, he has to bring her free. I don't know. As teased in the opening crawl, Ahsoka searches for a map which is vital to the enemy's plan, as it points to the location of Grand Admiral Thrawn. So we pick up with her going towards some old ruins on Arcana, which was a stronghold for the witches of Dathomir thousands of years ago. And I do really like getting all of these tidbits to the Night Sisters in these first 2 episodes, and we're getting a lot more from Morgan Elsbeth compared to Season 2. I believe at this point, Ahsoka was doing some puzzles in that little temple, and I'm sure that reminded many people of doing similar, somewhat puzzles in Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor, playing as Cal Kestis, and I'm sure there's already a bunch of theories into how Cal Kestis could be popping up in live action in this show. I don't know about that. Now, on Ahsoka's way out of the temple, this is when she's confronted by some of these HK droids, of whom I'm assuming are from Baylan's crew, and I guess perhaps maybe he sent the Inquisitor-looking dude named Marok there in advance. We have a fun scene of Ahsoka taking care of these HK droids. I can't help myself, but I guess it's a good thing that the self-destruct on the droids takes like a whole 20 seconds to go off, so Ahsoka could make her escape, because otherwise things may have ended here and then in the show. But that explosion was pretty cool, like nuclear almost. I did think to myself maybe Force speed would have been helpful as well, but maybe similar to Star Wars games and Jedi Academy, Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, you have a little Force meter bar and she couldn't use it at the time after her combat with the HK droids. So up next, we're on Ahsoka's ship, and this is where we have her trusty droid Hyung there, of whom is a droid who oversaw a lot of the lightsaber construction in the Jedi Order for, I'm pretty sure, centuries. And he goes on to even identify Baylan's lightsaber later on in the episode with him, of course, being another, the 150th Jedi to make it out of Order 66. I mean, to be honest, I actually have no idea how many there have been, but it does feel like there's been a lot. Now, he doesn't identify Shin's lightsaber, and my only guess into that is that we had Baylan take on Shin because maybe he recognized her as Force sensitive, so she built her own lightsaber. Maybe it's going to be a lot deeper than that, because I feel like them teasing, oh, this is Baylan's, but we don't know whose this is, that somewhat indicates that there could be something a lot more interesting. Now, the next thing we see is Ahsoka reuniting with Hera Syndulla, and Hera informs her about what has happened, of course, with Morgan Elsbeth being sprung free by this mysterious master and apprentice. So Ahsoka points out that the star map is locked, but Hera also points out who could be helpful with something like this. So this is where we cut to Lothal, where we have Clancy Brown's live-action portrayal of Ryder Azadi talking about the heroic efforts of Commander Ezra Bridger and the other rebel leaders with a monument on display. But this also brings me to the larger commentary of seeing more of these characters now portrayed in live action. And I have to admit, I'm not gonna lie, it took me a while to get sold on the new Sabine, played by Natasha Liu Bordizzo, I probably butchered the name there, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead's Hera. I still would say that I'm not completely sold on it, or I haven't like got used to it yet. And I do want to make it clear though, I did enjoy what I saw of them in these first two episodes, especially the pickup scene here with Sabine speeding out the city on her bike with that track playing in the background to match the character's spirit. But it still just kind of felt weird. Similar thing to even seeing Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka for the first time. And this is why some Star Wars fans in general were apprehensive about live action Rebels, if you will, with the Ahsoka show in the first place, so to speak, because at the end of the day, you're used to a certain depiction with those voice actors playing those characters in a very specific portrayal and a very specific medium. However, the more the episodes unfolded, such as episode 2, the mannerisms of the characters and the way these new actors gave life to that, I was like, okay, I'm warming up to it a lot more. But let me know if you agree or disagree with me there. Maybe I'm alone, but there is something that feels a bit like, yeah, I don't know just yet. But I do expect that to change. Now, when we get to Sabine's place, my god, is that Lothcat so adorable. We also see Sabine listen to the message from Ezra Bridger, and it's very, very, very similar to the final message we get from Ezra Bridger to Ghost Crew in Star Wars Rebels. So somewhat of another homage here, potentially, but also including a pretty deliberate "you're like a sister to me" line to, I guess, potentially cut off any somewhat sort of romantic connection speculation that fans have had between that of Sabine and Ezra. I mean, you'd have to think that is why they included that very specific line there, which I think some people aren't going to be happy with. Some people are going to probably be on the other side saying, yeah, I never saw it anyway, so I'm glad that they put that in there. So let me know what you think of that. And it's also been very, very clear just for Sabine's own personal journey here in the Ahsoka show that remains consistent from Star Wars Rebels, that ever since we heard that first message, Sabine has somewhat held this responsibility of seeing this through, as they put it here, or as they put it in Star Wars Rebels, counting on her. And she says in Rebels, but counting on me for what? So we see how this plays in her mind in a few scenes after this, and where she's sleeping, and we hear the similar lines from Ezra. This is where she reunites with Ahsoka for the first time in a very long time. So in the years since Star Wars Rebels, with Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger being sent into hyperspace with the help of the Purrgil, Sabine became Ahsoka's apprentice. And this is actually a huge theme of the Ahsoka show. As Dave Filoni puts it, I'm telling this story about this mentor-student relationship that passes from Anakin to Ahsoka to Sabine. It's quite extraordinary to bring this to life. It's very much the idea of apprenticeship, the need for two groups to come together in order to pass down the knowledge and to help save the world, in the case of Star Wars. So you can see that here with obviously Ahsoka and Sabine, but also, yeah, of course, the Anakin and Ahsoka stuff that is rumored to be explored in this show, but then also Baylan and Shin Hati and what could be explored there, which is still, I would say, fairly ambiguous right now. I mean, we've got a good idea of, okay, he survived Order 66, and maybe he saw Force sensitivity in Shin along the way, and the kind of, dynamic they'll have that we've still yet to get quite into. And to be honest, that's one of my most anticipated things about Ahsoka, is getting a bit more into, okay, what actually happened to Baylan post-Order 66? What are they really like? 'Cause they're not pure dark side, but they're not like pure light side. So with how it currently stands, Sabine feels as though Ahsoka never really made things easy for her. Ahsoka is giving the vibes that she was perhaps a bit maybe too hard on her student. But now, with this united mission and huge lead on finding Grand Admiral Thrawn, and more importantly, Ezra Bridger, it brings them back together again. So this is when Sabine disappears with the star map, which goes strictly against Ahsoka's wishes. And little does she know that Shin has actually been dispatched by Baylan to go after her. And when we see Shin, what I do like with what they've done here is that there's quite a parallel between this moment here and the Phantom Menace, in where she's kind of gone all out Darth Maul mode with her little probe droid on the prowl for Sabine. So after a while, Sabine does crack how to open the star map. I get that she used the scans, but I'm not gonna lie, again, nitpicking here, the way they just showed her barely even rotating the surfaces only a couple of times of the star map, that I wouldn't even say is comparable to rotating a Rubik's Cube. She just did it a couple of times, matched up the lines, and it feels as though to me that she could have done this very soon off of her own intuition, and it wouldn't have taken too many attempts to get it. So I don't know, but hey, at least it worked. Now, once it opens, Shin's droids got the drop on her, and I'm sorry to be nitpicky again, but this is something that a lot of fans have picked up in a lot of recent Star Wars shows, whether that's the Book of Boba Fett or The Mandalorian, where we had Sabine being restrained by one of the HK droids. I don't get what punching an HK droid would do. It would do nothing, but they still decide to do this in choreography anyway. I don't know. It's the same thing with knocking a stormtrooper, slapping on the face in the Obi-Wan show, and they fall on the floor, and it's just that wouldn't happen. Either way, in this moment, Sabine calls for backup. Ahsoka is on her way, but this is when she gets her lightsaber, which is actually Ezra's lightsaber, but Sabine has modified it quite a bit, and she faces off against Shin. Because of what I think of the fight so far, I did enjoy it. Clearly, there's a big difference between Shin and Sabine anyway. Sabine is quite rusty, but is still quite skilled, even before she was trained by Ahsoka. But obviously, she's not really a match for Shin's abilities, in where she's actively practiced in the arts of lightsabers and the Force, so ultimately she does overpower Sabine. I still prefer much quicker combat, kind of somewhat like the prequels, but I do understand criticism with that. Quite often there's a lot of swings that when you really take a second look at it, it's kind of like, why are they doing this? Where those swings are kind of redundant. So I guess maybe that's what they think with modern approaches to Star Wars combat, and where they slow it down a bit and try and make the swings a bit more deliberate and logical. And what I will say is one of the strengths of that, and in this fight, is I liked how aggressive the fight was with how hard the swings were. But the way it ended, I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm just not. How many more times in Star Wars are we going to see seemingly killing blows not be killing blows? I mean, remember Reva in the Obi-Wan show when she was a youngling, 6 years old? She got impaled, Qui-Gon style, survived that. Then again, from Vader in present day, in the Obi-Wan show that is, she got impaled again survived that. And yes, I do know that you can argue here that with Sabine, it was slightly off to the side, in where Qui-Gon's example likely went through his spine and his pancreas, so that's what led to his death. But what it all boils down to me with these consistent lightsaber impaling moments in Star Wars that we get these days is that when these moments happen, it's meant to, I assume their intent is to be somewhat of a shocking thing, but am I meant to expect to feel shocked or feel anything? Because why bother doing it when there's no shock factor to these with what you keep consistently doing? Or more food for thought here, you know, just getting impaled by a lightsaber seems meaningless until eventually it's not meaningless and something does happen. So I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. Just do something else, like dramatic, but not that. Now we're launching into episode 2. And can you believe it? We saw Sabine get healed pretty damn efficiently. I don't think I've ever seen a speedy recovery like that before. Now, as we get into episode 2, you know, the beginning of my larger commentary here is that I can see why they wanted to drop these first 2 episodes at once. Because through the events of this episode, things end up in such a way that really kickstarts the grand Ahsoka adventure with the plot that's going on. And it really feels somewhat like both episodes are just a longer episode 1, and I've noticed that a lot with various shows these days and where they're doing double drops, in where I can imagine if they just dropped episode 1, it might be a bit more of not a mid reception, because there's still quite a lot to be engrossed in with just episode 1 of Ahsoka, but people to wait a whole week for just episode 2 that again feels like a longer episode 1, it might have fared a bit differently in terms of audience perception. But if you get both of these, it's like, okay, yeah, it's a much more, not self-contained story, but longer episode 1. So now that we've got episode 3 next week, we're all actually really looking forward to seeing where things go. So anyway, after realizing that Sabine did in fact unlock the map, but they need a bit more to get back on track, this is when we have Ahsoka returning to where Sabine fought Shin and take out the last remaining droid for its head to get another lead. Now, speaking of Shin, she's now back with Baylan at some old ruins that can utilize the map, or more specifically, locate the reflex point on Cetos, I believe it was called. Now, when Morgan arrives here, this is where things get pretty cool with the star map, and I think where I really started to dig where things were going overall. Now, don't get me wrong, really hyped to actually get Grand Admiral Thrawn, but this is where it was sucking me in with a lot more of the larger overarching story. Baylan mentions here that this place was not built by the Jedi. Whose work is it? And she explains that it was built by an ancient people from a distant galaxy. Now, with all of these references, and I'm not saying this is the case, but there's clear references to Knights of the Old Republic in the Ahsoka show that have been given their own stamp and innovation. So even if not directly connected, you know, you can look into the Eye of Sion and Sion, Darth Sion, right, from KOTOR 2, or the star maps, which is a KOTOR 1 thing, or the HK droids, which are somewhat of a new play on HK from KOTOR. I immediately thought that this ancient people from a distant galaxy being spoken of here, who built this place that fits a star map, could be a hint at the Rakatan Infinite Empire. Now, I'm not saying it is, it's just you can argue that there's an influence there. I love the way the star map is activated and how it surrounds the ruins. It's kind of how it operates in Knights of the Old Republic, but like a much bigger version. So at this point, and as I was teasing a minute ago, I was really thinking, I think what Ahsoka has going for it, on top of just bringing hugely popular fan favorite Star Wars characters of recent years to life in live action, is that this story really is an interesting one. Not saying that recent ones like Andor, I love, isn't an interesting one, even though lots of people like to say it's boring, but we're not getting into that debate. But I think this is the biggest crowd, like overall crowd-pleasing and alluring story that we've had in a while. Its plot is quite huge, spanning multiple planets and even arguably galaxies. Mysteries, ominous characters, all searching for Thrawn and seeing both perspectives at play in their quest to get to the pathway of Peridea. It just feels like fans are gravitating to this a lot more because it feels like the first major event to happen in Star Wars canon from Disney in quite a long time. The other shows like Andor are dealing with a serious moment in Star Wars, or The Mandalorian is dealing with like a really cool, and you know, it is a popular show, story with Mandalorians. And sure, you could argue Giancarlo Esposito's Moff Gideon got quite big in overall Star Wars plot, but it's still not as almost movie level plot and what the repercussions of this could be in the Star Wars universe, because Grand Admiral Thrawn and the threat of his return is pretty damn huge. So as for the rest of the episode, we have Ahsoka and Hera head to Corellia, as after looking at the droid's head, they realize that it came from there, and Morgan Elsbeth had factories on this planet that should have been dismantled after the rebellion. But as we find out during the episode, and what we found out in Andor and some other episodes in other shows, an empire doesn't just turn into a new republic overnight. So after Hera spots a hyperdrive core that she knows the New Republic definitely isn't building anything that big with what that would be required to make, everyone in the control room goes, "For the Empire!" and then starts kamikazing. And yeah, this is when Ahsoka jumps out the window like a badass. Hera gets into the Phantom with Chopper to go after the escaping ship. Loved seeing Chopper, obviously, and Hera just, you know, chatting back and forth about the tracking device, or just how Chopper wanted to take out the ship, which would mean endangering innocent people if it blew up over them. But it's just the typical Chopper approach. Now, the next scene is what's piqued fans' interest for quite a while, I would say ever since the trailers. So this is where Ahsoka faces off against some more droids, and the character who is quite seemingly without explanation at the moment. And this character is named Marek, and he got referenced by Baylan a couple of times, but he seems to be dressed like an Inquisitor. He even has a double-bladed spinning Inquisitor lightsaber. So after a brief duel with Ahsoka, he manages to get away with Shin's help. And there's a lot of fan theories that I want to talk about very briefly. That what if Marek, this Inquisitor-looking dude with the Inquisitor-looking helmet, the Inquisitor-looking lightsaber, is secretly Ezra Bridger. And that's why the show is playing it so coy with who the identity of this masked figure is. But I don't really get that, unless I'm forgetting something right now. If Marek, who is allied with Shin and Baylan Skoll, is Ezra turned to the dark side, because yes, I get it, he's always had a pull, as established in Rebels, to that of the dark side, wouldn't he just bring Morgan Elsbeth, Baylan, and Shin to Grand Admiral Thrawn's location? I feel like people are forgetting that, like, who really believe in this theory. If he came from where, because, you know, Ezra got transported with Grand Admiral Thrawn, how did he get back here to be a part of this effort to get back to Grand Admiral Thrawn? I don't get it. But what I will admit, though, and maybe I am reading too into this as well, the one thing I will admit is that they are playing coy with the identity. Maybe it isn't that deep, but no matter what, it is ambiguous. Now, after healing pretty damn efficiently, Sabine, now invigorated with a new hope of finding Ezra, realizes that she's ready to team back up with Ahsoka as master and apprentice, after also having the piss taken out of her by Huyang earlier with how apparently younglings have more force ability than she does. This moment was really awesome because we get to see the good old Sabine look. She gears up in her armor, she cuts her hair to the length we're quite familiar with from Rebels, and we even get a very similar shot to that shot in Rebels, and where she looks at the monument, except obviously in this live action show, Ahsoka isn't in the white kind of mystical robes. So once again, this is more of a tribute to that scene at the end of Star Wars Rebels, in where she states that it's time to bring Ezra home, rather than a recreation. But you could almost say that this was the same scene, because, again, fans of Rebels will know exactly what I mean there. And then at the very end of the episode, we see what the hyperdrive core was being used for. Again, that is a construction of the giant Eye of Sion that looks like a bloody halo ring. This thing is huge. Morgan Elsbeth plans to use this to deliver Grand Admiral Thrawn from his exile in the far galaxy. And given how huge this thing is and how long that would take to construct, it goes to show how long this has been planned from Morgan and the Shadow Council with regards to bringing Grand Admiral Thrawn back. So overall, everyone, Ahsoka episodes 1 and 2, I really enjoyed. I think that this is just a taste of what's to come. I don't think it absolutely blew me out of the water. What I'm trying to say there is I don't want to put it up on such a pedestal of such hype and where it was the best Star Wars thing I've seen in ages, but I want to be real and level with everyone and say that I just think it's a really good start. Both episodes combined in a binge viewing does serve as a nice springboard into the adventure that we're going to see move from here on out. And the reason why I think it's such a promising start in that sense is because the story is so fascinating. We're now, after just 2 episodes, getting more familiar with the castings, or at least, I am with Sabine and, of course, Hera. I think we've only been teased with how awesome things could get with them and the journey their characters will go on. I'm super intrigued. I have a bit of a bias for some more evil-esque users, not saying they're straight up evil, because I do think it might be a bit more complicated than that with regards to Baylan and Shin, but super intrigued to get into whatever the heck's going on there. Don't get me started on Thrawn. We haven't even got into the possible introspection of Ahsoka herself because of the heavily rumored Hayden Christensen Anakin scene. So we're going to be getting into some stuff like that. This should be, for all intents and purposes, quite a recipe for success. Let's just hope that they don't fumble it. Don't want to be pessimistic there, but you never know. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree with anything I said in my ramble? In the meantime, we'd just really appreciate a like, a subscribe maybe, if you want to stay up to date with my rambly Star Wars coverage. I promise the reviews aren't as long as this one. This is 2 episodes in 1 video, so that's why it's as long as it is. Plus, it's in the name, BobaTalks. I do talk quite a bit. But anyway, I'm going to love you and leave you. Can't wait to read your comments down in the comment section below. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and may the Force be with you always.